The broken bonds of your past don't have to impact the brave beginnings of your future. Let's say it again. The broken bonds of your past don't have to impact the brave beginnings of your future. Hey ladies, welcome back. You're listening to Xpose H.E.R, the show that brings seductive conversations about intimacy and trauma to the forefront. I'm Juliet, as you know. So today what we're going to talk about is broken bonds and brave beginnings and healing the foundations of intimacy. We'll explore how our earliest experiences shape who we are in our physical and emotional intimacy. This is about attachment, disconnection, and finding our way back. I want to just give you this soft reminder. This is not just my story. This is our story. So let's be real. The shame, the secrecy, and all of that's been holding us so long. So let's get into it, all right? So I want to take y'all back a little bit. I love to sit in Indian style because it's comfortable for me, but girl, I'm getting a little bit old and my feet be falling asleep, but this is a comfortable space for me. So let me tell you a little bit more. My mom is a single parent of 3 children. I'm the youngest. I have a middle sister and I have an older brother. Now, I was born prematurely and my grandmother used to tell the story of me being big as a man's hand. I also remember as the story was told that they talked about me being so small when I was born that I could fit in a shoebox. It's so funny how we process stories and where it lands. Because I remember at one point in my life being curious about it. And then I also remember at points in my life feeling like, was I a burden? Was I too much? And I think that story came along as I started feeling a level of disconnect between me and my mom. I think as the story and life went on, I started not really understanding why me and my mom could not connect and why we argued all the time, and often just felt, I often felt alone. I started feeling like, well, maybe because I was born prematurely, maybe because my mom was a single parent, I was a burden, and maybe I was too much for her at that time. I had a lot of curiosity about what that could have looked like, you know what I'm saying? And what's weird is at times I've had dreams and flashbacks of being in the hospital and seeing someone walk away. And I've always wondered, was I lovable? Was there any space for her to love me? Because when I thought about it as I got older, I was like, well, my mom was a single parent. She was working all these jobs. She had her children. She was trying to figure out her way. Maybe we didn't connect because there was no more space for me. These are the ways that my thoughts would go when I was trying to figure out why I felt so alone. It's not easy really even talking about this story because there's some shame, there's some fear, there is not really embarrassment, but just more so fear. There's a desire to protect when people might try to judge or what people might say, but it's a part of the story. It's a part of my experience, right? When we're talking about Xpose H.E.R, the only way we get to our true experiences, the only way we get to the healing is really talking about them. The reality is sometimes our truth sucks, and our truth doesn't have to be anybody else's truth. But the big part that we're learning is, what are the foundations of my story? In order to heal, I've got to know the foundations of my story. I've got to know what impacted my thought process. What memory did my body hold on to that impacted me feeling so alone? I felt alone a lot, y'all. I felt connected to my grandmother. My grandmother, I don't even know how you're supposed to say it. Like, I'm her namesake or she's my namesake. So I think I'm her namesake, right? So her name is Juliet Wise. My name is Juliet Wise. My grandmother was an artist. My grandmother wore her afro like big for years. I mean, she was good and into her 70s and her afro stood big and beautiful, and she had these high cheekbones and you could see the red tones in her cheekbones. She was strong. I remember when I would cry or I was in like maybe a confrontation with my mother, and my grandmother had an apartment where you could walk through her bedroom into the bathroom. And I remember one particular memory where I was crying, but sometimes, you guys, I would cry so hard that my head would hurt. And I don't know if I was trying to hold it in because I don't know that I was screaming. I was just like, you know, have you ever cried and you just hold it in? And so I would cry, and I will never forget my grandmother coming into there, and her body used to be wet with this dew because she was always sweeping and doing something. and she would walk around with her bra. That's where I probably get my exhibitionist type of freedom. It was something we did. And so she walked in and she had the dew on her body, and she ran the cold water on a cloth. She would call it a cloth, right? It was a washcloth, but my grandmother referred to it as a cloth. And she ran that water on there, and she took it and she said, "Calm down, Tanya. It's okay, Tanya. It's okay." And she took that cold rag and she rubbed it on my face. And I remember that it would shock me into that space of calm. You know, the funny thing, y'all, is back then, I didn't know anything about body work. I was a child. I didn't know about holistic healing. I didn't know about the nervous system and how it held on to pain. I didn't know those things, but my grandmother wiped my face that day. She was my protector. She was nurturing. She was the nurturer. My grandmother passed away when I finished undergrad, and it was one of the greatest losses. And what's so weird about losing my grandmother is I recognized about me, even then I had detachment or attachment issues. I loved her so much, but it was so hard for me to go and visit her at the nursing home because I knew she was going to go. And I wanted to already let go of her in my mind the way I wanted to let her go. But when I lost my grandmother, it was such a great loss because that was the only thing I knew of a nurturer and of a protector. You know, even as I talk about it out loud, it brings so many emotions because it's like there's this conflict that goes inside because you want to protect your family and you want to protect what people see of things. But I'm learning, even as I'm talking to you all, that for my grandmother, she was my protector. And even when I talk to you all right now, like I can feel that warmth all in my body. I felt a lot of disconnection and I didn't know how to connect. You know, my mom was doing the best she could. My mom worked hard. She sacrificed for her children to go to Christian education. I know she's had her own story, but that's hers to tell. She was surviving. She was a single parent in a very religious environment. She had dreams. She had things she wanted to do, but she was a mom. And so she was doing the best she could, but she had her pain too. And that's the thing, y'all. That's why we're in these conversations together, because in order for us to show up in our seasons, we have to be able to understand our pain, or we will have problems with our intimate connections, right? So when I think about those earlier days, y'all, those earlier days planted deep seeds in my understanding of emotional connection and even physical connection. See, when I was a younger child, I wanted to be hugged. I wanted to be nurtured. And it's funny because as I was saying it out loud to you all children want to be nurtured. Did y'all know that if a preemie is not touched often, and I can't give you no research, the full research to back it up, but you can look it up yourself, the physical touch, a child can literally die from not receiving that physical touch that they need in those early stages of life. And so I needed nurturing, I needed hugs, I needed touch, and I did not get much of that. So that connection was broken, and I didn't even recognize what was supposed to happen, right? I didn't understand what connection was supposed to look like. Honestly, I feel like I was in a constant space of survival. Those early experiences, desiring connection, physical connection, and emotional connection, and not getting it, shaped how I saw it. And I can't tell you that just stayed in childhood. That moved throughout my life, that moved through my younger years, my time in high school, my time in college, because I just desired connection. I did not know what healthy emotional connection looked like. So I learned by observing other people's experiences. And it was trial and error, which kind of sucked because I had different experiences that really kind of messed up my life. Well, let me not say it messed up my life. It didn't mess up my life. So I started looking for connection in different spaces, looking for an understanding of what connection is. Now, of course, I didn't know that was what was happening then, but as life has gone on, I've come to understand that is what was happening in my experience. And let me tell you, it didn't stay in childhood. You know, this followed me into adulthood. It impacted how I connected in relationships and how I approach physical and emotional intimacy, because I was kind of just learning on the fly and learning as I went and observing kind of what other people did, try to replicate it in hopes of getting form of connection, right? This included people pleasing, advocating for people, and I'm not saying that advocating for people is wrong, because clearly that's what I knew now, but sometimes we don't realize that we're doing that out of our need. And so we do it to an extent that can be damaging to ourselves. And that's a lot of what's related to codependence, right? Because we desire the love, we desire the gifts, we desire the connections. So then, therefore, we give those things in hopes that we will get it back, not realizing that that's what we're doing, right? So we're loving the way we want to be loved and then expecting it in return. And then it hurts really bad when people don't have that same loyalty to you. They don't have that same sacrifice for you, and they don't necessarily have to. It hurts really bad when that's what you thought it was supposed to be. And in some cases it is, but it's not supposed to be that they have to love you the way that you love them. If you don't understand connections, then you'll desire it to happen just that way. And that's what hurts us, okay? So this is my truth, y'all. This is a part of my truth. And I've come to believe that sharing my truth provides more and more freedom each time. Sharing my truth allows the wounds to start healing and me not to be ruminating. Sharing my truth gives you the opportunity to heal and identify what it means to be free in your space. Sharing my truth also helps me to understand my story and to accept every single part of me, because in accepting every single part of me, that's how we love, that's how we grow, that's how we connect, that's how we let go, that's how we heal. Let's talk about premature birth and attachment. Research shows that babies born prematurely are often separated from their parents during critical bonding moments. This physical separation can disrupt the process of forming secure attachments. For parents, the stress of having a premature baby combined with challenges of survival mode parenting can make it harder to provide the calm, nurturing environment babies need to feel safe. And that lack of safety can leave an imprint shaping how we navigate relationships as we grow. When I was researching this and I saw it, it helped me to really see what you're experiencing is valid. I'm a researcher. I'm a person who is evidence driven. Who knows? I could dissect it all over the place just because of how my mind works as a therapist. But when you think about the validation you need in your experience, validation and understanding just based on research. And then when I get research and I put it together, my mom was having a hard time. She was raising her children. She was trying to survive from whatever experiences she had in her life. She was courageous in deciding to keep her children, putting them through Christian education, fighting systems, trying to provide financially, fighting whatever traumas she's experienced. In the midst of that, though, I experienced a lot of loss, right? And so I want to connect the research for you guys, because it's important to understand the research, because sometimes the research is what validates our experiences. So according to developmental psychologists, when babies don't experience consistent safety, they may develop insecure attachment styles. I might have said that already to you. So this can then manifest in adulthood as fear of intimacy, difficulty trusting others, or even avoiding relationships altogether. You know what's crazy about this? This is not the episode where I talk about this as much, but when I think about the foundations of my life, the foundations of me coming into the world, the environment was difficult and it was not set up in a way to where there was a space where healthy attachment could happen. Not in my opinion. And so what I used to get mad at God about was, okay, so this happens, right? This is already the dynamics. And then you allow me to experience then sexual abuse too at a young age? So where's your grace coming from? Where I'm trying to figure out my story. I'm observing people in the environments, trying to figure out how do people have fathers and how do they have uncles and people to play with? I'm curious about all of these things. And then I get these layers of trauma. So that's where my spiritual disrupt came, is because this is here, now this, then this. Like, what the hell? right? Okay, so I digress. So come on back. I saw this in my own life, and I saw how I experienced fear of rejection. I have experienced hypervigilance. Now, just like I said, I don't necessarily know if that was all related to being premature, but I'm trying to help you to understand the narrative that impacts trauma. The hypervigilance I know was there associated with my sexual abuse. I know the hypervigilance was there because I knew that this man had sexually abused me, and I knew that he had sexually abused other people, and I knew that there were other children around him. And I had this awareness, but because he was in my environment, because he was at church, because it seemed like nobody did anything, I had to hold this inside of me, which in fact impacted my voice. But in my brain and in my body responses, I was hypervigilant because I wanted to protect anybody else that could experience pain from him. My desire to protect as a child other children was strong. I didn't have a lot of power. He was still roaming around. So why is this part of my story important? Because it's the narrative. Did you guys know that our trauma is held in the 80% of our body and only 20% is in our brain? Did you know that? And so if we don't recognize that 80% of our pain is carried in our body, and we keep thinking that, okay, I'm going to get the philosophy, and I'm just going to get the research, and I'm going to do this plus this plus this, and I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to survive, and I'm going to thrive in my relationship, and I'm going to be a great parent, a great pastor, a great leader, a great this. It's a lie from the pit of hell. You've got to understand how things are carried in your body so you can understand the attachment wounds, and we can start a healing. Healing comes from our awareness. Healing comes from our acknowledgement. Healing comes from our voices. Healing comes from our stories, not our disassociation, not our victim blaming, not our acting like nothing happened, not none of that mess that, I can't think of all the words, but it don't come from that. Healing comes from our presence. And in our presence, as we expose, we heal. What else did I tell you to do? We heal, we explore with our curiosity, and then what do? We find restoration. So here's the question. How do I begin to heal those broken bonds and brave those new beginnings? You know what it is? You know what we do? We start to ask questions. What happened? What was my connection like? Where were the times that I felt sad? Where were the times that I felt alone? Who hurt me? Who protected me? Who didn't protect me? Have I ever asked myself these questions? What do I feel about the lack of protection? How do I see it show up? Do I see myself being hypervigilant in relationships? Do I see that it's difficult for me to trust? Why are these questions important? These questions are important because we've got to understand the narrative that's carried in our nervous system. Where is the pain? Where am I hurting? If I don't understand where I'm hurting, how am I going to heal? It's not asking questions to be bitter. It's not asking questions to dig up roots, to be mad at people, and to be revengeful. And don't ever let anybody tell you that. Some people will try to say, people just need to get over it, or that's old and we just need to move on. That's disassociation. It's invalidation and it's deflection. To heal, we've got to understand the story, because what you don't know is that the story is showing up daily in how you interact with somebody else. Whether that's somebody at work, whether that's with your child, whether that's with your partner, whether it's at church, whether it's with God, no matter what, it is showing up. So we can either identify it, we can talk about it, we can expose it, or we can hide from it and we can stay stuck. The one thing I had to do is identify and recognize my survival patterns. I had to recognize what I had been doing to survive. One thing I was doing was staying in detached relationships. The other thing I was doing was saving people. The other thing I was doing was sacrificing myself all the time. The other thing I was doing was, as I got older, being in situationships because they were safer. I didn't have to be emotionally vulnerable to where you could possibly hurt me. Being in unavailable relationships because it kept me safe. Staying away from God because I felt like God was the biggest one that could cause harm. Keeping myself avoided. Staying busy. These were the ways that I survived. How do you see yourself surviving? Sometimes we don't realize the very things that are hurting us are our survival patterns. I'm not here to be judgmental. I don't care about judging your story. Everybody's got a story. I could give a rat's ass if somebody judges mine. Everybody's got a story. And the way that we find healing is walking through the story. But when we walk through the story, that's where healing comes. So you gotta know your survival patterns. You gotta ask the hard questions, because when you get the answers to the hard questions, y'all, that's where the healing comes, okay? So I wanna leave you with this. You may not have had a perfect beginning. I didn't, and that's okay. The broken bonds of your past don't have to impact the brave beginnings of your future. Let's say it again. The broken bonds of your past don't have to impact the brave beginnings of your future. So until next time, let's keep it bold, let's keep it sexy, and let's show enough keep it real. Let's expose her, all of her. I'll talk to you soon.